Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, if you had paused just 1 second longer, I was going to come up there on stage and smack you in the face in what was definitely not a ratings stunt. Definitely not. So, Tony, I appreciate you keeping my name, I guess, in your mouth in that case. I'm not sure. I heard it too.
I do think if we're going to slap anybody in the face, it's like, let's wait till Kevin is part of the show and we're doing something live on scene somewhere. That way, everybody will enjoy it. And I don't care if Kevin enjoys it or not, but as long as one of us enjoys it, because I would enjoy slapping him or also watching it happen. And I'm sure you would as well.
Some might argue that the listener's enjoyment should factor into this in some way, but I'm glad you saw through that charade, and yes.
Yeah, most of what we do on the show is for the people. Some of it is for us. That would be one where we're a little bit selfish. Yeah, so Tom, we don't need to just keep disparaging Kevin. We can actually talk about what we're going to talk about here. And on Tuesday, it was a full day of interviews listening to Ryan Day, Kevin Wilson, and Jim Knowles discussing what's the situation like at Ohio State after 6 practices. In this show, however, we're going to focus on what Jim Knowles had to say because I think the offense is going to be fine. I think they're going to be okay this year. The defense is the question mark. There's a lot of information just coming in. He provides a lot of information, and that's one of the things we both like about him. He will talk and he will name names, and when you ask about somebody, he'll go into detail about what he likes about that guy. And so we're going to, I guess, kind of spit all of that back out to you in terms of what he had to say, what we think about it, and, where this defense is headed. And, 6 practices in, I think it's going to be pretty good this year, Tom. What do you think?
It seems like they're set up to succeed. He's introducing a bunch of new concepts, and they're just starting to get into a few things right now. Like this on Tuesday, he said that Tuesday practice was the first one where they were really working with the jack position. They're really introducing that in more detail because they'd really been just doing kind of like the straight 4 down. The jack position is the Leo position. We'll get into that a little bit later. We're learning all the names. Some of the terminology is changing right now. We're all learning together. But yeah, it seems like, I don't think they know exactly where everyone's going to be. And there are some guys moving positions, which is really intriguing. We're probably going to do a whole morning scoop show on just position moves later on in the week, because that is real fascinating. I think you can read between the lines and pick up a lot of additional information based on just some of the position moves they're talking about. But yeah, he is a fascinating interview subject because he will give it to you in some detail. He will not talk, he doesn't talk to you like you're 6 years old and it's like, well, the football's the one with the pointy ends, not the round one. It's you get a little detail, you get a little bit of, but he does a good job explaining it so that dummies like us who are not necessarily, neither of us is Ross Fulton. Let's just say that out loud. Neither of us is Ross Fulton, so that dummies like us can understand the concepts that he's explaining. It's like, he is a good teacher because I understand what he's saying. So that's good. He must be incredible at his job.
Or maybe we're just really good students.
I think that goes without saying, but I'm glad you said
it. You're welcome, Tom. Thank you as well. So initially here, what I want to do is just, he named a lot of names. He was asking about a lot of guys. So I thought, let's just go down and discuss the guys he talked about, what he had to say about them. And that way that'll give you guys a picture of who's doing what, who's doing well, who's standing out, and just what he thinks about those guys. And the first guy for me is, I think maybe the first guy mentioned, was Tommy Eichenberg, who Knowles said is mastering the defense quickly and making plays. And I know when we have discussed what these linebackers need to do, Jim Knowles says they have to be able to obviously stop the run. They have to be able to run sideline to sideline or from hash to sideline, and then also pass, cover the pass. That's not necessarily what we expected from Tommy Eichenberg, and I don't know that, if that's happening. Ohio State throws the ball a lot in spring, so I'm assuming he's doing pretty well at that. But to have him already standing out when, I think maybe the thought was, maybe the thought of this show is Cody Simon was the starter last year and then got hurt. And what, with him healthy, does he overtake Tommy Eichenberg, who started at the end, mainly because Cody Simon was hurt? And so with both of them healthy, that this seemed like maybe this is where Cody Simon would excel. But and maybe that still is in play. This is certainly not out of play, but he said Tommy Eichenberg is doing really well.
And, that I don't know that that's a total shock to me. I don't, and I don't necessarily also think that where guys stand 6 practices in is going to be an exact representation of what the depth chart is going to look like for September 3rd against Notre Dame. I think right now, a lot of that is going to be who's picking up the defense fastest. That's probably, kind of the number one thing that is sort of a little bit of a separation right now. And this is not something that he said. This is me kind of reading between the lines. But if you're picking up the defense faster, whether that's because you've played in a more similar system in the past, or just you are, connecting with this information a little more quickly than other people, whatever it is, I think that's probably going to be playing a little bit of a factor in who's kind of getting off to a fast start this spring. Like Tanner McAllister lost his black stripe in the span of 5 practices. Like, would you like me to explain why Tanner McAllister's picking up Jim Knowles' defense pretty quickly? Well, he may have played in it a few times in the past, so that will probably help. But also Tanner McAllister is looking like maybe he's going to be a starter this fall. So it doesn't necessarily, this does not preclude Tommy Eichenberg from starting this fall. It also does not guarantee that Tommy Eichenberg is going to start this fall. I talked to Ross Fulton on one of the morning scoops for Tuesday this week. And he was talking about kind of the 4 linebackers who he felt maybe fit the what Jim Knowles needs from his defenders from a physical perspective the best. Being able to run sideline to sideline and stuff like that. That's more of that Chip Trayanum, Steel Chambers type linebacker than the Tommy Eichenberg more traditional middle linebacker guy. So, we'll see. There is a role. There is a role for that type of linebacker on this team. Is that a 60 snaps a game role? Maybe not. And he may end up proving that he can do that. And that his skill set's a little different than what we think right now, and that's what the next 9 practices of the spring are for, and then summer camp and all that. So, but yeah, it was not shocking to me that Tommy Eichenberg is off to a good start this spring.
You mentioned Chip Trayanum. Jim Knowles was also asked about him. He said, "I've seen nothing but good things out of Chip." Obviously, Chip came from Arizona State, where he was a running back. Ryan Day said that they recruited him as a linebacker, just like they did Steel Chambers. And one of the things that Knowles said is he likes having linebackers who were running backs because they understand where the ball is going. They understand the blocking scheme, so they can get to the ball when it kind of hits the line of scrimmage, or maybe even before. Like, they ultimately know where they think the running back is going, and they have, I don't want to say innate, but they've just been playing running back for most of their lives, so they understand what they think like a running back. And Tom, sometimes to catch a thief, you have to use a thief or think like a thief. And that's something that they have now with Chip Trayanum and Steel Chambers, where it's just an interesting aspect of that position, that experience that they can bring to it.
So, Tony, as always, this reminds me of the movie Swordfish. Do you remember the movie Sword? Yes. In order to catch the world's best hacker, you need to have the world's second best hacker, maybe first best hacker. Maybe you're just trying to catch the world's second. It's been a while. It's a John Travolta movie, so the plot is very good and detailed. So
I call it a Hugh Jackman movie. Some will call it a Halle Berry movie.
Yes. So anyway, so the John Travolta movie. In order to catch a thief, you have to have a thief on your side. Yes. So that's basically playing linebacker is like hacking. Tony, back to you. No. Seriously, the conversation about the linebackers, the running backs moving to linebackers is really interesting because it's not like you're intentionally recruiting guys to start their career at running back and then have to switch positions 2 years in. That's probably not the ultimate. That's not the going to be a formula that's going to go great for everyone. Not everyone's going to want to do that, but you can kind of see why it works. It's kind of like when you talk to guys on the offense or guys on the defense, a couple of years into their career, they'll talk about, well, last year I knew what I had to do. I knew what my role was. This year I understand the whole defense, the not just what everyone's doing, but why everyone's doing it. that's important because then you really understand the defense when it's not just I know what my role is. It's you know what everyone's role is, why everyone's doing it. That shows you've got kind of a complete understanding of the system you're running. If you have that kind of understanding of the system the other team's running, if you know when I'm a linebacker and I see this type of blocking, this is where this running back's going to pop out. Like this is why they're doing this. If you understand the why of what the other team's doing, then that makes, that gives you a huge leg up. So it's interesting to me that those guys both were recruited by Ohio State as linebackers, decided they want to start as running backs, and now, okay, it turns out they probably are best suited for what they were originally trying to be recruited for. That's fine. You can learn stuff your own way, and I'm sure Trip Trayanum enjoyed his 2 years at Arizona State and enjoyed being a running back. And you don't have the what if now in your mind. Like you got to try it, you got to do it, and now you can come be a linebacker at Ohio State. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the skills and the skill sets that you're looking for out of a linebacker, both physically and mentally, in the Jim Knowles defense, a lot of those kind of correspond to being a pretty decent college running back, and both of those guys were pretty decent college running backs. So it kind of makes sense that's maybe potentially working out.
My mind is running now. You talking about the swordfish thing? I think maybe we have a follow-up to Brown Thunder that I would call Line Hacker.
Mm.
And you've got these former running backs who now play linebackers, but also somehow hack.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, back in the 80s or even early 90s, that's all the plot you needed to get a show going. It's like, well, they're this, but then they also hack. And Tom, as I was watching Jurassic Park for the 470th time yesterday, when the granddaughter is there, and she's, I don't know, 11, 12, but she considers herself somewhat of a hacker. And I'm thinking, I don't know, and I've read the book several times, but I haven't read it in a while. I don't know if it was Michael Crichton or if it was Steven Spielberg while he's directing this, and is just like, you know what? We need a hacker. Kids know computers. Just make the kid a hacker. And that's really all you need. So I think anybody can hack as long as you type wildly and then celebrate afterwards. Like you have to boisterously like throw your arms up when you've done something as you're proud of yourself for your great typing and hacking skills. Now, of course, also they can play linebacker.
Yeah, I think you have to have, my understanding based on 90s movies, and 90s movies exclusively, is you have to, number one, type very fast and hit the keyboard very hard. Number two, definitely need at least 3 computer monitors.
Yes.
That's a big thing. You need to be able to frown, and you need to be able to say the words darknet. That's I think that those are really the 4 true keys to being a great line hacker. I look forward to speaking to Jim Knowles about this at some point in the future and having him go, what? You were around in the 90s. Come on, sir. Do you not remember the Sandra Bullock vehicle, the Net? That pretty much explains everything that we're explaining here.
Yeah. Did you go to Cornell, or do you just say you went to Cornell? Like, are you really that smart? Come on. Like, she ordered pizza from her computer before anybody. Oh, the Net. Another show that Tom, now another episode of Buckeye Weekly where we've talked about Sandra Bullock for some reason. Speed. I went to see Speed twice in a theater, but Tom, we need to get back to the football. A guy who could eventually, Tom, be an offensive line hacker is Mitchell Melton, who was a linebacker, an injured linebacker freshman last year. Now has seemingly made the move to defensive end. Jim Knowles said he's been a guy who's jumped out at me. Ryan Day echoed this as well. I think Jim Knowles later on said that he's shown the ability to get pressure and make moves and be part of that defensive line. And he is one of the guys working at that jack position, as we'll get to later on. But he came in, he was a big linebacker. He's, like 6'3", 245 pounds or whatever. And now with the linebacker room being so congested, so now you've already moved. We didn't even talk about Kate Stover moving from, can you really say he moved from linebacker to tight end? He
vacationed on the defensive side of the ball for a couple of weeks.
And now is back at tight end. Mitchell Melton at linebacker, moving to defensive end, and they're able to send guys elsewhere to find roles for them. And right now, Mitchell Melton was the silver bullet of the day on Monday. seems to have found a home, and that guy not being able to play last year, which actually would have been his redshirt freshman year last year, right? Yes, because Cody Simon was his second year. So this is his third year now. I don't know how many more guys how many guys are hungrier than he is right now.
Well, he's a little bit like, he's the guy who didn't get to play a ton as a true freshman and then missed his whole sophomore year. He's a little bit in that Teron Vincent camp. Teron Vincent has obviously been here an extra year and played a little bit more, but it's the guys who've been around and you've sort of seen a little bit and you hear positive stuff about them and it's like, okay, well, I can't wait to see this guy on the field, and then you can't ever see the guy on the field because he's hurt. Him missing last year, Tyler Friday missing last year, like those are guys who I think this is a big spring for them to potentially show what they can do because you're getting a fresh start with a new coaching staff. Melton is someone who's interesting because he was recruited for a position that doesn't really exist on the Ohio State defense anymore. I mean, the Sam linebacker is like, it's a thing, and Paula Teote, and it sounds like Reed Carrico are going to be there, and they're going to have a role for it, but it's not going to be something you're going to see necessarily every game, at least in anything other than kind of a bit role. So for Melton, if that role doesn't exist, and he can fit another role on the team, just step one step to the left on the depth chart. Okay, you've gone from the Sam and now you're in the Jack. Okay, great. He seems like he has the size. He potentially has the quickness to fill that role, and this is something where everyone's kind of starting from zero. So if he's starting from zero as well, that's not a huge problem for him. So yeah, that felt like a very natural move to me. I think it was something we even maybe talked about in the lead up to spring, is like maybe that's somewhere he could get on the field. So yeah, that's a really great opportunity for him, and good for him for making the most of that opportunity. Early on this spring.
Another guy that on that defensive line, Kourt Williams, he said, "I love what Kourt is doing." He has been part of this defensive line that Knowles was asked, when you got here, was there any, or since you've been here, has there been any part of the defense that has been like beyond your expectations? And he said the defensive line has created, they create a push. They changed the line of scrimmage. He's been impressed by their burst, their get off. And then he said, the rest of the defense is basically what I expected, but he's just been really impressed by the defensive line and the athletes and the players that they have there, which I think you look back last year, maybe there was a disappointment in that defensive line in terms of the impact or the numbers or the stats or the pressure. So I think it is a very good thing that you're already hearing very good things about the pressure that is coming from this defensive line. And Knowles is very complimentary of Larry Johnson, who he called the greatest of all time in terms of defensive line coaches. So the rest of the defense will figure itself out, and they're doing that right now. But as we know, everything starts up front. And when the being impressed starts up front, that is a tremendous sign for the future of this Ohio State defense.
And I guess the question of who has exceeded your expectations, I would like a very upfront answer from Jim Knowles on what were your expectations. And that's one of those things you're never going to get a straight up answer. But you look at the recruiting that Larry Johnson does. One of the reasons you can call Larry Johnson the GOAT is look at the recruiting that Larry Johnson is doing. Look at the second year defensive linemen on this team. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Kourt Williams, Mike Hall, who I think is, Mike Hall is one of those guys we're probably going to be talking about a lot more in 2 weeks or 2 months than we are right now. But like just put a pin in that. Put a pin in that one right now. We'll plant a flag there because you're already starting to hear a little bit about him. He's someone who I think we talked about a little bit going into the spring as well. And he's starting to sort of validate some of that hype. He was a little bit, kind of the forgotten man last year with that defensive line class. But the talent there is just so good. Just across the deck, you've got 5 stars all over the place. You've got incredible athleticism with Kourt Williams. Even someone like Ty Hamilton, who is, another one of those guys who you just, like, I said Ty Hamilton's name and people probably went, oh yeah, Ty Hamilton. Like, he's someone who's good, good, quick. You keep kind of hearing positive things about him behind the scenes that he's maybe ready to take that next step. There's so much depth, there's so much athleticism there that, if you are putting those guys in a better position or, in a better scheme than they were working in last year, that's going to make a big, big difference. I think you're I don't know which level of the secondary I would have thought like that is the most positive sign you could have in terms of, or which level of defense, that Jim Knowles could say, this is the group that really exceeded my expectations. Like, I think you could make an argument for any of them. Like, if he had said the linebackers really exceeded my expectations, that would have been a pretty good sign. If the defensive backfield had really exceeded his expectations, that would have been a pretty good sign. But he sounds pretty happy with all of it. And there is always a delicate balance as a coach in the spring of not over-promising and under-delivering, but also, communicating to your players like, yes, I appreciate the good work you're putting in and all that. So that's sort of a delicate balance. And I think we'll know more in the coming years about how Knowles tends to fall on that scale in terms of positivity versus, kind of hesitance to praise or whatever. But yeah, he seemed pretty optimistic about the defensive line, and that, it's not a bad thing.
Zach Harrison was not brought up, so he didn't say anything about Zach Harrison. I'll be interested to hear what his thoughts are when that happens. He did say his quote was, "I've been impressed by Teron," referring to Teron Vincent, so that is good. He was also asked about JT Tuimoloau, and he said he has great feet, an excellent takeoff, his reactions are excellent. He referenced a zone read play where he was able to play both the dive and the quarterback for a loss of yardage. And the quote is, "I've liked everything he's done so far. I think he can be a dominant player." Even mentioned that he could be a Leo or a Jack down the road. He's learning it, but it's not really what they're having him do at this point. But just furthering what Ryan Day had said previously about now that he's had this offseason, he's had work in the strength room. He's had work on the defensive line. He's had film work, and all of this is coming together. And just another part of that defensive line that is, I think obviously we're expecting quite a bit from JT Tuimoloau this year, but to all of the different things that he had to say, Knowles had to say about Tuimoloau, it's like, well, this is good. This is good. Oh, great feet and excellent takeoff. Oh, and he's quick off the ball, and he reacts well to everything, and he's strong. And gosh, he sounds like he's a pretty good player.
Well, and he was asked about moving Tuimoloau out of the jack spot, and it was like he seems like the prototypical strong side defensive end to me. So he was, he wouldn't have been in the top 6 guys I would have thought about moving over to jack, but I mean, it sounded like that's at least something they're considering. So yeah, he's one of those just scratching the surface guys. We've talked about him before, that you come in and no spring ball, no summer workouts, you commit on July 20, whatever, basically show up at the start of fall camp. And then a month later, you're playing at Minnesota and playing more than Jack Sawyer at Minnesota and playing more than, all 3 other true freshman defensive linemen last year. Like, that was remarkable. That was incredible. And now you've got a year, you have a weight, an off season in the weight room, and you've got a spring ball, and you're going to have a summer camp. I don't have a ceiling that I'm willing to put on him this year. It may be, he's not going to break Chase Young's single season sack record. All right. Like, that's probably not going to happen, probably. But yeah, I mean, there's just the size, the quickness, the strength, like you saw it last year. And it should all be better this year. And he should be in a defense that's putting him maybe in more different positions to succeed this year. I mean, there is a ton of potential there. And, if he's in the, let's see, what awards might he be in the consideration? Was it the Ted Hendricks Award? Is that the defensive end award? I mean, like, if he's in the running for one of those kind of awards this year, like, that wouldn't surprise me at all. It seems like there's a ton of ability there, a ton of potential there, and you're just sort of starting to scratch the surface of what he really can be.
Yeah, so it sounds like he and Zach Harrison, Tyler Friday are your strong side guys. And it was funny. I think it was Doug Lesmerises who asked him, say, Ohio State, when they had Joey Bosa or Nick Bosa or Chase Young, if you were here, would they have fit into the Jack or the Leo role? And he was like, basically, those guys, you don't need to do anything with. You don't want to mess with those guys. You just let them do what their thing is. Now, he did say it would be fun, to use them in certain ways in that Leo position. But when they can do what they do, you just let them go. You don't want to interfere too much. And maybe that's what JT Tuimoloau becomes. One of those guys where we don't need to get cute with him. We just let him do what he does, and then he'll make all the impact that we don't even have to scheme it up, necessarily. So that's maybe what happens there with him. Knowles was asked about his 2 freshman linebackers, CJ Hicks and Gabe Powers. Said Hicks has great short area quickness and can break on the ball. Said Gabe Powers is quiet, but his trajectory, I think he said basically it's like straight up at this point. He just gets better every day, and he's, like I said, quiet, but he understands, he listens, he learns, and can take take their meetings to the practice field. So pretty high on those 2 guys. And it's going to be a tough climb for either one of those guys, given how congested that linebacker position is right now.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy for either of them to get on the field, and that's and if neither of them make a significant contribution this year on defense, I mean, I have a feeling those 2 guys fit the special teams assassin kind of profile pretty well. Like, you may see them on kick coverage this year. If you don't see CJ Hicks in the 2 deep by week 3, like, do not just throw the bust label on him. Like, it's going to take a little time. They have so many linebackers in that room. We don't really know how it's going to sort out. He sort of fits the profile, and this goes back to the Ross Fulton conversation. He fits the profile of the kind of guy, and the way Knowles talks about him, he fits the profile of the kind of guy that Knowles would like to have at that spot. But a true freshman linebacker, like, that is not a place you get on the field as a true freshman that often. It can happen, but it's not. It doesn't happen that often, and it really doesn't happen when you have a really deep linebacker room. So I think patience is a good idea there. But Gabe Powers, CJ Hicks fits the physical profile of what Jim Knowles is looking for there, and is if you've ever talked to CJ Hicks, he is a very smart kid, and Gabe Powers is people talk about the coach's kid. Gabe Powers is literally the coach's kid. So he's going to have a pretty good understanding of football as well. So those are 2 guys who I think you're going to see a pretty steep learning curve for them, but it is still a tough road to get on the field as a true freshman, as a linebacker, especially with a unit as deep as this.
Those 2 guys will be interesting to watch on special teams if they can get involved there. And there is certainly a focus on that. Knowles did say, like, right now, you almost don't want to saddle guys with the special teams because they might, like, almost get down because of it. It's like, that's something later on in fall camp and as you start game planning where, like, we need you here. And he did say that Parker Fleming shows clips of, like, all of these Ohio State greats who started out on special teams, like Pete Werner. And you can start out on special teams and do really well there and still be a 2nd-round pick as a linebacker, which is a good example for both Powers and CJ Hicks. The safeties, Josh Proctor was obviously asked about. He's taking part in some individual drills right now, not likely to be ready to take part in any team activities in terms of any team scrimmaging, or only non-contact stuff, basically. And whenever Jim Knowles, in my eyes, whenever he is asked about Josh Proctor, he's very wait and see about him, because he hasn't seen anything. All he has seen is film from last year, which there wasn't much, and other practice film. But, basically hasn't seen him do anything. But the quote is, we need him. We want him. He's what we want at safety. Day on Tuesday said, well, they wish he could do more right now. And so there's this wait and see with him. Now, while that is going on, the quote on Ronnie Hickman, I love Ronnie Hickman. I just think he's a great piece in the middle there to run the show back there. And it sounds to me like right now, Ronnie Hickman is that starting free safety. He is, the adjuster there, takes the field side safety, and is basically, like I said, the free safety. And that is what you would have expected Josh Proctor to be. Ryan Day talked about his nose for the football, Proctor, his range, his athleticism. He's a difference maker when healthy. But right now, Ronnie Hickman seems to, I don't want to say he's won a spot. He has won over Jim Knowles. And every time Jim Knowles is asked about the safeties, I don't think this is the first time he said, I love Ronnie Hickman. Like he goes, he's all in on Ronnie Hickman. The other interesting thing is he said previously a couple weeks ago, I want Ronnie Hickman on the field. I want Kourt Williams on the field. Now that he's seen these 6 practices, he did caveat the Kourt Williams thing with, well, he needs to be better in pass defense when it comes to covering receivers. they need to get him better at that. So it might be this situation where he is either going to be a package type of guy, where maybe that's Josh Proctor's spot as the bandit, the boundary safety. And they like Proctor's physicality, but this is one of those things where Kourt Williams is going to be given a great opportunity to see if he can handle the receivers, because Ohio State's certainly going to test them with the quarterback they have and the receivers they have. But as Noel said, they want as much film as possible to coach off of this spring, and they're going to get that with Kourt Williams. And it already sounds like they're seeing some hiccups, but it's practice 6, and this is where guys really start to take off, and we'll see how he does.
And, you know, I think between those three, the Ronnie Hickman thing surprises me the least, because Ronnie Hickman was, I mean, just go through, this is always a great metric to use, but just look at the Ohio State fans on Twitter talking about the safety play last year. Everyone hated everything about the safety play, and you still couldn't find anyone saying anything negative about Ronnie Hickman. So, you know, as always, defer to people on Twitter. That's a great rule for pretty much everything in life. But, you know, I mean, Ronnie Hickman was like the most consistent thing on a wildly inconsistent defense in about 10 other positions. So the fact that he can move to a different spot on the defense and probably also do it, like, doesn't surprise me at all. He's someone who you have consistently heard good things about, and you probably would have heard better things about earlier if he hadn't been hurt. He missed basically his whole first year. Now he's healthy. Now he's really making an impact back there. So yeah, he is for sure, like, in ink, one of the starters, and it sure seems like he's trending towards the starter at that adjuster free safety role. The boundary safety is a lot more involved in the run fit. So, you know, that's where I thought Kourt Williams was going to be, you know, made sense there, because he is a little bit bigger. He's a little bit more safety / linebackery. So, you know, that feels like a spot where he could fit. But you got to be able to do everything. You can't just be the run safety. You've got to be able to do everything. So, and Proctor, you know, I mean, he has been potential since the day he stepped on campus. He was the guy who either in spring or fall, I don't remember which it was, but his freshman year, it was like you just heard like 3 practices in a row about how Josh Proctor had an interception and Josh Proctor was making plays back there, and it's just been like, oh man. Well, once this guy's healthy and on the field, and it hasn't happened, and it hasn't happened, and it hasn't happened. And you've seen it a little bit, but you haven't seen it consistently. You were going to see it last year, and then he got hurt in the Oregon game, and then you didn't see it again. So, you know, I think he's gonna grade out incomplete until Jim Knowles can really see him. And he was doing some individual work on Tuesday, which represents progress, but he's still not out there in 11 on 11 as far as we're aware. So that's still going to be a little bit of a wait and see thing on him. But, you know, if you gave me those 3 guys, I'd say it's better than 50-50 that, you know, 2 of those 3 are going to be the people who get the most snaps at the adjuster and the bandit roles, the field and the boundary safety this fall.
Yeah. And they are completely separate from the nickel, which right now is Tanner McAllister, Cameron Martinez, and he also said Legend Cavazos has been getting some work there. Sonny Styles was asked about, and I don't know if it was Dave Biddle or somebody else saying, you know, Sonny Styles probably ends up at linebacker, and Knowles is like, whoa, you know, we're gonna give him a shot at safety, and to me, like, he fits into that boundary as well, because I have doubts about a 6'4", 215, 220 pound guy being a field safety, the quote unquote deep guy, if there is even a deep guy per se in this defense, and so that congests things. Not that I expect him to be battling for that spot. I think what they have with those 3 safeties, with Hickman, Proctor, and Kourt Williams, Proctor and Hickman I think they can play either spot. So that gives them some freedom of movement. When Kourt Williams comes in, it's like the 3 cornerback rotation that we've seen before. I think you can do some 3 safety rotation where when Williams is in, the boundary moves to the field, because that Hickman or Proctor can do either. So they just move, they rotate a little bit, they have some packages that they like, and you go from there. And well, and Noel said, like, if you've got guys that can play and they show that they're worthy of it, then you have to find spots for them to get minutes. And so I think he's finding that he's got some guys, and it'd be interesting. Now the fun part is you have all of these pieces. Now go do stuff with them. As Urban Meyer used to say, draw them up on the napkins and have some fun. And that's where they are right now.
Yeah, and this is kind of, I think, a new challenge for Jim Knowles, where you haven't necessarily had this kind of depth to work with before, where you're going to have to rotate guys, and you have so many guys who've earned a spot on the field that you're going to have to figure that rotation out. You kind of just you just kind of mentioned this casually. It was maybe one of the most moments of the press conference to me was Legend Cavazos has moved to the nickel cover, the Tanner McAllister, Cam Martinez nickel spot, or the they used to call it the slot corner, whatever role you want to call that now. Knowles calls it the nickel, so we'll call it the nickel. So that's interesting because it tells me, okay, they feel he has coverage skills, because that is 100% a coverage position. That is not a position that has a run fit, really, responsibility. That is a coverage position. So they feel he's at least got coverage ability, but they're moving him off of corner, where you have Denzel Burke, who's in a cast, I think, right now. You have Cam Brown, who's had injury issues on and off. Tony, that strongly suggests to me that they feel pretty good about J.K. Johnson and or Jordan Hancock about being, filling those outside corner roles if you're willing to move Cavazos off that spot. That was kind of like, that maybe it tells me something about Cavazos and where he fits on this team. But I feel like that kind of has a little bit of a secret meaning about some other guys on this team and what it might mean for their futures as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime guys move, there's guys, behind them that are already, and I agree. That's as much about J.K. Johnson, Jordan Hancock, and the confidence they have in them. I will say, Tom, many years ago when Legend Cavazos committed or signed, I said that guy is suited for Ohio State's slot corner position. Nobody listened to me until Jim Knowles came along, and Perry Eliano and Tim Walton. So I feel perhaps the most vindicated I've ever felt on this show, other than all of the many times I have beaten you on our bold predictions. Although that's not really vindication, that's just expectation. That is just the norm. So can you really be vindicated when the norm happens? No, unless you're petty and bitter, which, yes. One last thing, not the last thing, but one of the last things that Knowles said about a particular player was CJ Stroud. And he said that 7-on-7 against the Ohio State offense and CJ Stroud has been frustrating at times because they do all of these different things. The defense does all of these things to try to disguise stuff. And CJ just diagnoses it, points it out, lets everybody know what's going to happen. And I thought, to me, that's a really good sign when you've got a quarterback who isn't being fooled by stuff. And if he's not fooled by anything or most things and has time to throw, that defense is in trouble. And of course, 7-on-7, there's no pass rush, so that tends to happen. But the fact that obviously Knowles is very impressed, but being a frustrated coach, I guess, is nothing new. But when it's like this one particular guy, it's like, almost becomes the bane of your existence, and he is the very thing that you're putting all of your hopes and dreams on as a coach. It has to be a pretty interesting dichotomy of the defensive coordinator who hates this quarterback but loves this quarterback.
There was a funny picture that Ohio State tweeted out at some point last week of, I think it was G. Scott catching a touchdown pass and Perry Aliano in the back, like behind the back of the end zone, like jumping up in the air. And you could tell that this was not like a celebratory jump. This was a, aw hamburgers kind of jump where he was probably not saying aw hamburgers, but it was, yes, you can see how frustrating that might be. I mean, you go back to the Rose Bowl, like Utah has a chance to win this game. They're up by multiple scores. They have a chance to win this game. That's like this program defining, incredible game against, one of the great national college football powers, and they literally cannot get one stop in the second half. It just cannot get off the field. It's just touchdown, and you can't get off the field. That has to be maddening. I mean, Ohio State fans have watched Ohio State defenses occasionally look like that, so you probably can relate to that a little bit. But yeah, this is, every time you hear people say stuff like that about CJ Stroud, it's like the ceiling goes up just a little bit for what this year could be, because the physical ability is there. You have seen him drop balls into, mailbox-sized holes from 40 yards away. Like, the arm's there, the talent is there. It's just like, now it's just, getting up to speed with stuff he maybe hadn't seen before last year. Now he's seen it. Watch out. I think, Tony, speaking of bowl predictions, I think the Ohio State offense might be above average this year. I think that's a possibility. I'm going to say even probable that they're above average this year.
Ooh, wow. That is bold. Spicy, Tom.
Except from the 17 and 34-yard lines.
Of course, yes. We know that. Knowles said he wants to have 2/3 of the defense installed by the end of spring. He said he's getting tired of showing Oklahoma State film to the guys, so he wants, to be able to show them their own film here shortly. The last thing that we can talk about on the show, the Leo is the Jack, and it's not the Leo until basically the Leo, Knowles said, is the king of the jungle. So you can't have there is no king of the jungle right now on the defense. So it is the Jack until he can do more. And so there's Jack Sawyer has been working there. Mitchell Melton has been working there. Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Caden Curry. And the interesting part, Paula-Ie Naoteote has been working there while also doing some Sam stuff. And as you mentioned, Reed Carrico also doing some Sam stuff, as Jim Knowles has basically come to the realization, or understood when he took the job, that this Ohio State defense is going to have to play more 3 linebackers than he did at Oklahoma State. And he said they had that 3 linebacker package at Oklahoma State, but never really used it, never needed to. He understands that they will now. So that's Naoteote, Carrico getting some of that luck. And that Leo, he said they threw a bunch of the Jack stuff in there. And we got to remember to keep calling it the Jack package right now. the Jet package that utilizes the Jack, as he said. And they threw a bunch of stuff in there now, and now they're going to see who handles it. But so far, it seems like they have an idea of who is there, what they like, and what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the Jack position in the Jet package, and the guy who runs the position, who mans the position this fall might be named Jack, but we're not sure yet. It is there's a lot of new terminology to keep up, and a lot of new exciting possibilities there for that team. But yeah, it is going to be a real interesting. I feel like that's gotten discussed maybe a little bit out of proportion of what it might be actually on the field this fall. But whenever it is on the field this fall, it is going to be that's going to be a fun thing to keep an eye on, because anything new and different and exciting is always, we always want to talk about it. We always want to look at it and pay attention to it as much as we can.
Having Jack Sawyer as that Jack now bums me out that Jim Tressel never recruited a guy by the name of Viper. That would have been pretty cool. All right, that will do it for this episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Hope you downloaded all of this stuff, as Jim Knowles likes to say. So that will do it for this episode. We will have another episode this week talking about what Ryan Day had to say, what Kevin Wilson had to say, and some other things. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.